Today we're checking out this brand new 11,000 watt inverter generator that is a tri-fuel unit. This is brand new. I saw this at the show and it immediately caught my eye just due to the fact that one, it is Champion, and two, this is really going to be, I think, a great unit. Now they did send this out to me for free, but that doesn't have any bearing on my videos. I tell that with any company that I work with that I always want to go over pros and cons, and also if there really is problems, then maybe this is an item you should stay away from. But being Champion, and it is one of the generator brands that I do recommend, I have a feeling this is going to be a good unit.
As soon as you open the box, you'll see a carbon monoxide warning label and also another box with a generator. Inside here, a lot of accessories like your wheels. You will have oil, an oil funnel, along with the two front feet that do have rubber stoppers, your propane line, also natural gas line, a bag of tools, also hardware, along with this axle so you can put on the wheels, and a manual that you should read. Now before adding oil, you want to tip the generator on the side to install the axles and also the feet. Having an impact gun definitely makes it much quicker, and then you can install the wheels. Slap this onto the axle, give it a spin, put on the Allen bolt, put on the cap, hit it, spin it again. Now you can tip this up on its feet, which you may need a little help because this does weigh about 200 and some pounds. We're going to pop off all the side panels to have a look at this engine. Now the first thing we see is this big heat sink. This is on the back of the inverter board, which this is really nice. This is going to help keep the inverter board nice and cool. Look at that. So really big. This will remove a lot of heat, and that goes right over that. That's the big vent. So this should keep it nice and cool. Pretty nice to see that. And another thing is this fuse. If something happens, that might be a good place to check. Another thing I really like is this cartridge air filter. Check that out. Now this will definitely make servicing easy, as it has a pre-filter on top of it, and also they put the tacky oil on the seal right there, so that little seal gets a kind of a stickier oil. That's something you'd see in like dirt bikes and quads and stuff. We're going to remove this outer filter. This is just a foam filter you would see in like the smaller generators. It's basically a pre-filter, and you just wash this in warm soapy water. Dawn dish soap works really well. Then you just oil that with some engine oil, and then you'll just replace this cartridge air filter, which I can't imagine this being more than about 15 bucks, and you can use this probably for several hundred hours depending on the conditions that you run it in. Then you'll just take the pre-filter, put it back on after you've oiled it, and you have to be careful with these, as after a while they can rip and you'll have to replace that as well. But then you can just go ahead and replace this, put it in, and oh, look at that, there is an O-ring. So if you happen to buy this unit, make sure you check the O-ring, as this will complete the seal. Now behind this panel is where the spark plug and oil fill will be. You will see a tag that says 10W30, but you can use 5W30 if you like. This will also come with a regular type dipstick, which you'll just fill in between the two dots to the upper level. We'll replace that, and right above is going to be our spark plug, which this does look like it's easy enough to get to, which is nice. Some of them can be a little bit tough, but I can get my hand in there and a tool, so this should be easy enough to service when needed. And one thing I did notice behind this big panel is that the carburetor is about right in the middle right here. It would be nice if this panel came off as well, or maybe kind of a bigger panel, but we'll remove this one, which has a bunch of screws, and take a look. Okay, now look at that. That really opens up everything. You get right to the carburetor, which is great. So if you have to service it, or even the load regulator, that's nice. You can also see the big air box. This is more of something that's just going to dampen the noise as it goes in, but I like it when you can get to components, especially the carb. Look at that. The low speed jet is one of the most important things to get to, because that causes a lot of issues. And this is really easy to service. Your drain screw for draining out the fuel is easy, but I like it when they put it on this side facing you. I wish more companies would do that, because it just makes it easy to service when it's one of the most common problems. But removing this whole panel lets you get to the spark plug easy, or your valve cover for valve clearance adjustments and more, so we'll move on. Now Champion does include oil, which is 1.1 liters or 37.2 ounces, which if you look in the manual, that is correct for the amount that we need. So we can place a rag down so we don't make a mess, pull out the oil dipstick, and then we can go ahead and add our oil. Go ahead and pour this in slowly, as I found out the supplied oil funnel doesn't fill very fast. Now when checking the oil, do not press this in all the way, just simply put it in until it stops, and then go ahead and check your oil and make sure it's at the upper level towards the top of that dot. And if it is, then you can go ahead and place the dipstick back in and push it all the way to its seated position. Now one trick you can do is on either the outside or the inside of the panel, go ahead and write the amount of oil that you need, that way it's always readily available. As we pop off this next side panel, we're going to take a look in here, which this is where our oil drain bolt is going to be. You can see our oil dipstick right there, and then you'll see a whole bunch of this black plastic. This covers the whole engine. A lot of companies are doing this to help make the generator quieter, so this will help dampen engine noise. And behind here is where the generator engine coil is going to be. At the front of the generator is our battery compartment. Now this will be a lead acid battery, which some people like the lead acid, some people like a lithium battery, just all depends, they both have benefits. Now one thing, I wouldn't mind this lead back here to be just maybe a little bit longer. I think just an extra inch or two would help get the job done. But after plugging this in and getting it connected, I did find one little shortcut that I ended up taking the strap off. That way I could take the leads, put them behind it, and then this kind of tucks them in a little bit more securely, as you can see here. So this is just one little tip or a trick that at least I did.
Now this generator will have remote start, pull start, and also electric start. Now you do have this 5-way selector switch where you can put this into the gas position. It also has a fuel shutoff position, off position. You have your propane selector and also natural gas. And this does have a detent, that way it stops automatically at the position you want. 12-volt socket. You also have 120-volt outlets, which these are 20 amp and GFIs. You have this 50 amp outlet, which this still is only going to provide a total of 37.5 amps because that's what this generator is rated for, is a max of 9,000 watts on gasoline. If you're running on propane, that means you get 8,100 watts or 7,290 watts running on natural gas. You also have this 30 amp outlet, which these ones here are the ones that are a little bit more common for plugging in your house and also transfer switches. Now this is something that they did add, was a breaker, because this wasn't on the original gas models, which is nice. This is going to be your propane or natural gas inlet. You also have this handle. This will help you move it around, and a little pin that automatically pops in place to lock it into position. Exhaust to be on the side. You will have the old style fuel gauges, which honestly these work and rarely fail. So maybe this is a little bit better than a digital fuel gauge. And this generator is rated to run on unleaded fuel with a minimum octane rating of 87 and of course 10% ethanol or less.
Champion does have this all weatherproof cover that you will have to buy separately, but it does come with a drawstring on the bottom. That way it keeps it covered in all types of weather conditions.
Okay, we're going to get this fired up with propane first, so let's get this hooked up into our connection. And they use this big beefy connector. That's going to be the same connection that you're going to use for your natural gas as well, but this is the propane line. Now if you have seen my other videos, make sure you crack this open slow first. Kind of hear that little psh. Okay, so what we're going to do is go over here to our propane setting. Now, if you read the manual, there are some little tricks to this one. It is a little different because this electric start button right here, if you press it once, it's going to go into standby mode. It's not actually going to start it, so look at that. And now this also gives you an option to press this green choke button. This is if you're going to manually start it, so I don't know what would happen if we pressed it now, but look. So that's actually going to choke it. So now we would go pull on the cord. That's kind of different, but I like that as long as the battery is charged. And then we would press this once, which I'm assuming that's not how we're supposed to do it. But let's just see what happens because we have to prime that line anyway. And it normally takes a few pulls to do that. Choke is still on. Oh, look at that. Well, you know, it looks like we can do that too. So, all right, well, there we go. The first fire up. What do you think? So that's your air intake right there. You can feel it just sucking in air right over that inverter, over that heat sink, remember? I do kind of like that. That's really going to help keep that cool. So this one will start up in eco if we turn this off. So now eco mode is off and this is going to rev the engine higher. And of course we get our simple display, which is just going to show basically your overall hours, your run time, also going to show the frequency, but at least it does give us some other information, how many volts and more. Okay, so as we take a look at our low idle RPM, this one turns right around 3,300 at low idle. So now we'll go ahead and turn this off. So now the low idle is off. And as we let that settle down there, it looks like our low idle is going to kind of hover around 3,600 RPM. And this motor is rated for 3,800, so that should be right around the max it should turn. As you can see there, right around 3,800 RPM. And just to show you guys something, check out the amount of suction from this engine, how much it pulls just from the airbox. So watch, just gonna hold my finger here, and wow. Crazy. That means it's really running almost everything through that vent over there and the airbox and in. So a lot of air moving over that inverter board. Okay, so this is that 23 foot mark that I always use, same place, just to get a good ballpark figure. This makes things real consistent, as I've tested a lot of generators right in this exact spot. So eco mode is on. Now we're going to turn eco mode off. Okay, now overall the numbers are a little bit higher, but we'll have to see how much power it's putting out and if it can maintain those levels, because if it can maintain the lower levels and also put out a lot of power, that's what we're really looking for, because this is just kind of a, you know, quick test, kind of see, but we'll do a quarter load and we will also do more of a full load test, about 80%. After I get some time on this, I'm going to do some break-in stuff, run it for a couple hours, and then we'll come back. And just another note too, just so you guys might wonder why the idle was kind of popping up and down. That is super common with almost all generators when there's no load, especially California, because they have to restrict them and make them run really lean. So you'll see Hondas do the exact same thing. It's notorious on the Hondas. They'll sit there and go ba 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 ba. But once you add a load to it, then you can hear, right now I have a very small load on here. It's only 600 watts. You hear how smooth it is? So just in case you were wondering about the popping, that is something you will hear with every generator when there is no load. It's just because it's running lean, and that's common, again, with pretty much everything.
Now, I know some people have said, isn't it dangerous running your generator right here? Well, yeah, it kind of is, but there are some precautions that I constantly take, because when the exhaust is blowing out, I also have the door open behind me, and I do have a fan that you can't really see and a monitor that you guys don't see off screen. This fan is on, blowing the air out at high speed, and then I also use this, which is a carbon monoxide detector, so that way I can see what's going on, and I just kind of keep this near me the whole time while I'm doing these, but I don't really ever show you this. I've had this for a few months, and I basically keep it around, but look what happens when I put this in front. If we were running gasoline, this would peg the needle much quicker, because gasoline is by far much more toxic, versus propane is not nearly as toxic as far as the afterburn, so your carbon monoxide levels are not nearly as bad. It's still dangerous, but as you can see, even just being over here, it's starting to already taper down, so this is just something I keep near me when I'm breaking these in. Now, I did want to show you guys the RPM and where it changes under load. So it's still on the low idle feature at 3,300, and you can see right now we have just a small load. So I'll increase the load, and then you guys can see here on the meter as we raise this up to about 2,000 watts roughly. This would be about a 0.25% load. You can see the gauge doesn't really change there. The tone changes just a little bit, but we're still pretty much at that 3,300 RPM. I'm going to raise the load up a little bit more, and you'll hear the tone change, but as we take a look at that RPM, it is pretty much staying the same as we get close to about a 4,000 watt load, which this is pretty good. This is about almost 50% load for this generator. I'll increase the load some more, and now as we take a listen and also look, so now we are over 50%. We can hear the generator engine change. RPMs come up about 100 roughly, and if we turn off the low idle right here, now you can hear the engine still goes up as we're running basically a 4,500 watt load. So at 50%, this is still quiet, spinning a low RPM. Okay, so now we're going to do a quick load test just to kind of check our pure sine wave. We're going to check it down here with this oscilloscope and make sure both waveforms stay the same. As you see how symmetrical they are, that's what we're looking throughout our test. That little dip is where it's plugged into my load device. We'll also check total harmonic distortion, as this is one of the main key features everybody likes to know, and we want to make sure it's 5% or less. Now right now we're doing a 50% load roughly, and as we take a look, you can see that both of the sine waves from leg 1 and leg 2, these both still look good and are both still symmetrical. If we take a look at the total harmonic distortion, just like normal with Champion, it does run that 5% or less. We are now doing about a 90% load on this, really running it hard. I have a little over an hour on this at the moment, so you break it in how you want, but if we take a look at the waveforms, just at the top of each one, a little bit of distortion. But this is why we check with a meter what the THD actually is, because 1.4% is excellent, just like Champion normally does, so I didn't think this was going to be a problem, but always good to check. Okay, a sound check at 23 feet and 25% load. Now a 50% load. And a little over 75% load. Okay, so now we're going to use this GenMax as a comparison. It's a tri-fuel 10,500 on propane. So the difference is the exhaust goes out the back of this one versus the Champion. It was coming out of the side, so that might make a little bit of a difference, but I'll show you what it looks like just for a comparison. So now a 25% load test. %50 load test. %75 load test, which I'm actually kind of surprised it's this loud.
Okay, just a little bit of side-by-side information. So this unit being newer, you would think would be more expensive. It's actually cheaper. This one here is about $200 to $300 more depending on when you find it. It also has a little bit less power. It does have a little bit more features as far as, you know, the display goes. Champion has always kind of been, you know, very basic on their displays, which, and I get it. You know, you don't just stand around and look at your generator. You kind of look at the hours, you kind of look at maybe your load, and that's about it. I like having all the data, but of course, you know, displays like that could possibly go out. Now, both of these are tri-fuel. They're both remote start. This one does have just slightly less power, only about 100 watts, really across the board as far as running watts. That one does have 11,000 starting watts. This one does have the exhaust out of the back versus that one does have the exhaust on the side. This one does have a few more removable panels as far as where you're going to get to the engine. I do really like that air filter. And as far as weight and size, the GenMax is a little bit bigger. It's just slightly heavier. And this one does run a 458cc engine versus this newer one, which has a 459cc engine. Another cool thing with Champion too is that because it is a brand that I do like, I like GenMax as well because they're kind of, you know, making stuff nobody else is doing. But as far as, you know, Champion and their customer service, they've always been one of the best. And they have a 1-800 number right there on the back. And if you call them, somebody actually answers. So that is kind of nice. Now, GenMax is getting better at it, but they still have a long way to go before they kind of compete with Champion on the customer service side. But for being how quiet this is, the size, the weight, also just how well it runs at keeping, you know, that lower RPM, this really is they really did a good job on this unit. I also like the serviceability of it and everything. They really did a good job. There are a couple little things that we are going to talk about at the end as far as the cons, at least, that I don't like. There isn't much, but let's go over that. Okay, pros and cons time. Now, well, I didn't really find that many cons, to be honest. There's a couple little things that I would really like to see maybe changed, but we'll also go over some of the pros as well. Okay, con number one. It's not really that big of a deal, but when you have this little breaker right here, not everybody does this, some people do, it just kind of depends, but when you turn this breaker off, This one right here is the only one it's controlled by. It'd be nice to have one for each. That way when you fire up your generator, plug in your cords, do all that stuff, then you can just use this, bing, or if you had a separate one for this one. Because these are both kind of higher output, so kind of be nice to have a breaker that controls both. Now behind here is your oil drain. There's the 4 bolts that take it off, or screws. It wouldn't be a bad idea, I think, to have, you know, an access panel right here and maybe a drain hose. Then you wouldn't have to take this off. You just flip the little thing like they have on other types of models. And then you can just remove the panel, pull out the hose, put it into a drain pan right here, and boom, you're done. No, you know, it just makes it a little bit quicker. Not really that big of a deal, but maybe for the next version. And maybe for the same thing back here. This is fine. You can get to your oil dipstick and get to the spark plug. But what if we had maybe just one big panel right here versus, you know, like the whole thing? You could have some thumb tabs, like 4 of them. And then you could also get to your carburetor really easy, just in case if you're always running on gas. And remember how the small speed jet, that is one of the most common things you have to clean. So if there was maybe one big panel, or a panel here and a panel here, or if it was closer because the carb is what, right there, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have that as well. Not that removing those, you know, if you have a screw gun, it's going to be real quick anyway. If you're running on propane and natural gas, that's not actually a problem at all. Just something maybe for the next version. And maybe one other thing that maybe they could do, and they could maybe even offer it, is instead of the foot pegs, because I was moving this around quite a bit, it would maybe be kind of cool if there were some casters on there. That way if you did have maybe a decent concrete or a shop or something else, you could have casters on there that might make it a little bit easier to kind of wheel around. Because this is a little bit heavy, and depending on how much you are going to move it, all depends, but maybe it'd just be an option. And you could have the casters lock, you know, one of them with a locking wheel. That way it doesn't move around anywhere. Those are really just personal preferences. But overall, the feet pegs work. That's how most of them all are. But I was kind of thinking about that today as I was moving this around a lot. I was like, man, it'd be kind of nice just to push it. Maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know. Now, as far as cons go, that's really the only thing I have. Maybe more personal preferences. When it comes to pros, there's actually quite a bit. Now, one thing Champion has always been known for is their good, clean power. The total harmonic distortion is low, pure sine wave looks great, and for the size of this generator, it's actually really quiet and the RPMs turn low, which is kind of nice. And also, it has a bunch of features that most people like. You know, it has a remote start. It's a tri-fuel generator. It does have the drain feature. That way you can drain the carburetor. But if you are going to let this sit for really long periods of time, like 6 months and more, it's best to just drain the carb screw at the very bottom, which is easy. The little automatic choke button is something they started doing a few years ago, which is really cool. And also when it comes to customer service, they're usually one of the best. And of course, when it comes to the cartridge air filter, I really like that. I think that's just kind of a cool thing. It's just me. Now, overall, what do you guys think? Is there something else you could compare this to? Now, I will have links down below, which obviously helps the channel out. And again, if you like the video, smash the like button, bam. And if you guys have any questions, there's a link down below. And I hope to see you guys in another video.